Um, what's cool is when you go live on Facebook, it has I don't know if you can see it on my part of the screen, um, where it has the number of viewers and the time we've been live. I don't know if you can see that on my side of the screen.
I can see
Uh,
the time we're live.
okay.
Uh,
Usually that's only a thing on Facebook. Um,
hmm,
it's the same setup as Facebook, so it's strange to see it here.
very cool. Yeah, I've never done anything like this before, so this will
Well,
be quite the trip.
um, I'm going to my channel just to see if it shows up as me being live. It does. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah. If you go to my actual channel where it has my video list, it says that we're live now. So that's good. That works out the way I want it to.
Now, do I really want to do that?
Well, you can go into my channel and look at my list of videos without clicking on the live video. Because you can go into anybody's channel and view their their history of videos without clicking on any of
Mm.
them. But I think being that your mic and audio source are here, I don't think I will hear them. But even so, you won't have to click on any videos. But if you go on my actual channel and go into my videos, it should say live now.
Oh, yep.
See what I mean?
Cool.
Yeah. Um, trying to make sure that everything's here. Uh, I'm gonna have to edit this down once I have the ability to do so because there's gonna be a lot of. It seems like there's gonna be a lot of dead time between now and when people start filing in. Um, I think we should just kind of start, going with the flow of it, and because it's a more intellectual type of thing. I think I'll let you introduce what we're doing in case people are looking at the thumbnail and not knowing what the heck the topic even means. So I'll let you kind of take it from
Oh,
a, philosophical perspective and explain it.
all right. I'll do my best. Uh, all right. I guess I'll just start off with a introduction. It's probably the best way to do it. Uh, all right. Hi, everybody. We are here today. Myself, Lanky, and Crash. You can introduce yourself.
We are Lanky and the OddCrapple. This is our very first um, collaborative live podcast on this channel. Um, we have done other podcast projects with another friend of ours, but this is more of the intellectual kind of thing where it's just kind of bouncing off of each other. Um, Sometimes we'll be on my channel here, or sometimes we will be on Lanky's philosophy channel. Um, so um, it's not always going to be philosophical. Like I think the next one I want to plan to do might be when we are at Comic Con in a couple of weeks. So I think that would be a cool, you know, live stream live stream to do. But yeah, this is just something fun for us to do, kind of engage with people and get, you know, expand our minds, expand the minds of others, and really create conversation. I think doing it in a live stream format is the better way to create conversation in the context of the subjects that we're talking about.
Mm, here. And today we're going to be talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a psychological theory formulated way back in 1943. Abraham Maslow was a psychologist, and in his book, A Theory of Human Motivation, he wrote his theory regarding human development and, I guess, growth as humans. Um, so basically, the hierarchy is a mix of physiological needs and higher minded needs. During his time, the prevailing theories were that the core of human motivation begins with the material stuff, the physiological, the purely materialistic, and all of our motivations are based off of that. Then there was another theory that prevailed, citing higher mindedness. It was the desire for human betterment, for a higher social being, etc. And Maslow was the one who melded them together, and so far, a seemingly perfect pyramid of his hierarchy of needs. So starting off at the bottom of his pyramid, you have physiological needs, which entail, let's see, yeah, food, water, warmth, rest, that sort of thing. And as you go up, you get the safety needs, which is security, safety. And as a child, you can think of this as like a parental guide, I guess. Um, Third, you get the belongingness and love needs, which are more intimate relationships, friendships, and I guess you could go anywhere uh, with that, as long as close personal relationships. Fourth, you have esteem needs. That's prestige and a feeling of accomplishment. Then above that, you have the fifth level, which is the self-actualization, in which you achieve your full potential, including creative, intellectual activities, um, and I guess technically even the physical, as long as it's both personal fulfillment as well as a more fully personal sense of self. And I guess
And
I'll leave it there.
yeah,
Time's up.
no, I just have to silence my phone because clearly I forgot to earlier.
Ah.
There we go. Um, I think one of the things that actually um, not so much shocked me because I mean it makes sense, but one of the things I realized in my research this morning um, was that the purpose of the pyramid was actually that you needed to start at the bottom and work your way up. And because you need to be able to have the lower levels to get to the self actualization. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try and go through each of the subcategories of, like you have the bolded headings and then you have the subcategories within the bolded headings. I wanted to try and go through the subcategories and try and give personal examples from both of us because obviously we've had relatively different lives. We've experienced different things in our lives, so I wanted to be able to give examples personally as to how we interpret the hierarchy and each thing you know within the hierarchy
Ah.
because there are things that there are a lot of things like with the material needs that you were talking about. Um, my interpretation of material needs has always been things that were superficial. Um, I've never viewed material things as necessities because pop culture always talks about materialism as things that you don't need, but things that you want. So materialism has always pissed me off. Um,
Yeah, I
so I think going through each subcategory within the bolded headings would, from a personal perspective, would be a very good thing.
fair enough. Because yeah, I think in this case, Maslow, uh, like, there's a difference between food and water versus the newest pair of shoes.
Yes.
So and the material stuff you need to survive. I think that was yeah, definitely the more consequential, necessary things in order to survive, that Maslow was, I think, yeah, alluding to. Um, Whereas I know in other, uh, psychological theories of motivation, um, yeah, I mean the temptation of wealth and materials and that sort of thing can also be a motivator. But I'd like to think, for Maslow's hierarchy, it's, the very basics of what you actually need to survive, and then grow from there as a person to, the more spiritual needs. So
Mhm. Um, and I think one of the core values of this, based on looking at it, because I have a small representation up on my screen so that I can reference it as well. I think that the more you have a better sense of self, the more at ease you're going to be with your life and the things that are in your life, because I always like to refer back to a quote that I found in doing one of my previous videos. Right after Luke Perry died, I found a quote by him where he was in an interview and it said, I don't want my life to happen to me. I want to happen to my life. And, he was I think that is a very strong self-awareness that he wanted to be able to control the variables in his life. And whether he was aware of that, legitimately aware of them or not, he wanted to have some control over the variables in his life. And so I think that quote has stuck with me since I made that video.
actually, yeah, I would argue self-awareness is probably a prerequisite for self-actualization.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kudos on him.
Just for context, if you could, is there a difference in definition between self-awareness and self-actualization? Because it seems like there could be a lot of similarities between the two. Uh,
uh
so
so
I'm wondering how similar they are, and if they could be essentially one and the same with slight differences.
yeah, well, okay, so Maslow's definition is that self-actualization is what a man can be, he must be. Um and uh let's see. And hold on, bear with me.
Okay.
Uh so yeah, it refers to the realization of one's full potential, the desire to accomplish everything that one can, to become the most that one can be. Uh Okay. And again, it's very subjective. So people may have a strong desire to become the ideal parent or to succeed athletically, create a
Mhm.
painting, pictures, inventions, scientific discoveries, political office.
Outside the specific interpretation presented by Maslow, though. Is there a broader definition of
Yeah,
of the two?
of self-actualization. Uh,
Because I'm more trying to find the broader definition of the two, self-actualization and or self-awareness, to see if there are differences or similarities. So, I mean, I understand where Maslow's coming from, but I'm curious to know if there is a broader definition for those two that separates them or makes them more similar.
well, I mean, for what it's worth, okay, I mean, just as a broad, dictionary definition.
Hmm.
So, self-actualization is defined as the realization or fulfillment of one's talents and potentialities, especially considered as a drive or need present in everyone.
Hmm.
So, whereas self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. So I would argue self-actualization is a state of being, whereas self-awareness is more of a state of mind.
Okay.
Um,
So there's the difference between the two. Um,
yeah,
so you're aware of your existence. So it kind of, just to put them into perspective, one's an awareness and one is the state of existence.
yeah. So I mean, self-actualization would be you finally made it to the top of whatever your current standard is.
Hmm.
Um, and whereas self-awareness would be, okay, this is who I am. This is what I have at my disposal. This is how I feel, my beliefs, my thoughts. Um, this is my effect on people. So you may not be at the state of self-actualization quite yet, but you are self-aware.
Hmm.
And again, I would argue being self-aware is definitely a prerequisite for self-actualization,
Hmm.
because if you know what you want, if you know what you're capable of, know what you desire, what motivates you, then I think that would be an adequate driver
Hmm.
for pushing you up that pyramid.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I would argue self awareness is crucial,
Hmm.
uh, almost at any phase of
Hmm.
this pyramid.
Yeah.
So
And just for anybody out there wondering, if it does concern you, I do think that this pyramid going up it, I do think that it is very much wheelchair friendly, so you shouldn't have any problems. I just had to throw that in there.
I don't know, man. Do you see that angle? It's like
It depends on the strength that you have.
it's like a 45-degree angle.
I know, but it depends on the strength that you have.
Uh,
Because if you have the wheels that we were talking about where they stop you and you don't lose your momentum, then you're fine.
oh snap! That is true. But you know what? I actually saw a video yesterday that um, kind of played with the notion that this pyramid may not always be a pyramid for everybody. Um, like
See, and that's
hypothetically,
weird because we were talking before we started broadcasting that this could relate to everybody in some way.
yeah. And again, not everyone treats it the same. So again, you have this pyramid with your physiological needs at the base, and then self actualization at the top. But hypothetically, um, you can have. I think the example they used was a musician who finally became like world famous and the top of his game, uh, knew his worth, and yet he neglected uh, the very basics, like food, water, general health, that sort of thing. So you have like a really wide self-actualization, um, and then probably a very similar uh, high esteem needs. Um, hopefully, some belongingness, love, safety needs. You might be a little bit reckless, and then your
Mhm.
physiological needs. I'm just doing cocaine all day. I don't need food or water. So
Wow, I think you're aging us because I think most of those type of rock stars existed in the 80s and 90s.
those are magical times.
No, it only seemed magical because everybody was tripping on acid and mushrooms.
But yeah, I mean, but you get the idea. The pyramid may not always be a pyramid, and it can meld into whatever shape, whatever your behavior is, I guess. So
Well, I mean, are the same basic tenants do the same basic tenants exist in whatever's because I don't I guess I don't understand where you're coming from in the sense that it doesn't need to be a pyramid because I think the basis of Maslow's explanation is that you need to work from the bottom up. So if it can take on any shape, that would seem counterintuitive to what Maslow wants it to be or expects it to be.
yeah, again, his pyramid is what he thought would be the ideal. Uh, uh, and actually,
Build
I would argue the weight of each need is proportional to kind of what you need. Like every day, you're
Yeah.
going to need food and water and shelter. Um, and ideally, talk to a friend or family member. You need to feel good about yourself. But again, there are people who treat the physiological needs, the safety needs, as as an afterthought.
Hmm.
So once they've reached the self-actualization point,
Hmm.
that's when they may fall from grace or something like that, where they neglect eating enough food and water. They don't hang out with their friends or family anymore. It's all you know the esteem, the prestige of fame and fortune, and being at the top of your game, and then you neglect the actual your health, the
Yeah.
physiological needs, the safety needs, so that priority is no longer this wide base. It's just a little bit thinner and thinner until
Yeah.
yeah.
And that
So
actually brings up a good point. You're talking about, being at the very top of your game. Um, I remember growing up where with a lot of celebrities, the common um, statement that they would make is it's very lonely at the top. So I wonder if, you know, once you're at the top of Maslow's pyramid, I wonder, do you have to still embrace the lower levels to stay at the top? Or if you, because if you don't, will it bring you back down to the bottom to have to work back up?
conceivably.
And is it situational? Because do you have to use this for each situation you're trying to accomplish?
uh I I would argue Maslow intended it to be universal. However, that definition of self-actualization can be very different between whatever environment, whatever social okay, I guess social environment that you find
Hmm.
yourself in. Like I mentioned earlier before we started recording, self-actualization may be very different throughout history, throughout locations around the globe currently, as well as within uh, whatever section of society you find yourself.
Hmm.
Because self-actualization, according to the hierarchy, doesn't necessarily mean financial success or um, like occupational prestige or that sort of thing. Like no one has to be a doctor or a lawyer to achieve self-actualization.
Right.
I mean, hypothetically, um, okay. I mean, using uh, probably like the French Revolution, say. So you had the impoverished masses,
Hmm.
kind of rising up to fight for their rights and freedoms and that sort of thing. Um, and one would argue that they definitely didn't have all the bread, all the cake that they needed to eat. So they were probably pretty low on the physiological needs. Um, they may not have felt safe. Uh, love and belonging. I mean, I guess collectively as a group, they were working together.
Hmm.
Um, as a revolution, you kind of need this confidence that what you are fighting for is worth fighting for. That it
Hmm.
is a good cause, and then you have action, your self actualization, where you're in the fray and you're fighting for a better future. Um, and again, so it may not necessarily have been a pyramid, but that those phases were definitely taking place during a revolution, and those revolutionaries may not have necessarily been rich or powerful or hell, they may have died during the war in which they were fighting, but at that moment they were self-actualized. They were fighting for a cause. They were passionate about it, and that's that's what motivated them to
Hmm.
drive their own personal growth, their human growth, their social growth. Um, and then that changed the course of history. So, uh, so yeah, you don't necessarily have to be rich and famous to be self-actualized. You have to know who you are and fight for the cause that motivates you.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because it's class independent.
Yeah. One of the things, I don't know if I said this before we started broadcasting or not. You talk about you don't have to be rich and famous to be self-actualized. Um, we were talking about materialism, um,
Mm,
and how I think because of the internet and social media and entertainment, I think that there is a strong a strong materialistic influence over social society in general. Um, and I mean, I would like to think that it's starting to dwindle, but I don't know. But I think that is, I think materialism is extremely cancerous in that regard. But the one thing that we were talking about was the fact that I've always looked at materialism as something very negative because it's always been portrayed as something very negative. Whereas, as long as you are trying to obtain and achieve the right type of materialism, it can, essentially be a positive thing. So, in your opinion, what do differentiate between, good materialism and negative materialism? What are some things that you could, differentiate the two?
well, I guess again from personal experience, I would argue a healthy dose of materialism is being able to have enough money to pay your bills, get any healthcare you need, pay for schooling, um,
Put food on the table?
yeah, put food on the table, uh, as well as so, like as an artist, um, I work with materials, like
Right.
literally.
Yeah.
Uh, so um, during the creative process, I would argue having enough materials to make something, to create a work of art, or hell, like in the realm of science,
Hmm.
to successfully uh, perform an experiment or discovery or that sort of thing. You do need the right materials to achieve that.
Hmm.
Um, however, when it's again more toward the negative now, when it's purely for accumulating stuff, um, and it doesn't really serve a purpose except to feed your ego, I don't think that's healthy materialism.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's bad for the environment because everything is made of plastic nowadays, and when you get bored and tired of what you have, you just throw it out.
I
And
was
now we
g
have a
I
bunch
was
of
I was gonna argue that people are not made of plastic, but then Pamela Anderson popped into my head.
yeah,
Oh, I'm going to hell.
ain't we all?
Uh, well, yeah, I mean, I guess there's an argument to be made that, we're kind of in hell right now, that, this existence is hell. Um, but um, which is weird. I had actually never thought about it that way, but about a year ago, somebody, you know, posed that argument to me that we're actually, you know, in hell. And then what we go to after our physical being is gone is, something we achieve, as a result or as um, a reward for dealing with being in hell for however many years we're on this earth.
You know, I and if I were a more religious man, I'd be like,
Oh, I'm not
yeah,
religious. I'm not religious at all. I'm more
yeah,
spiritual. That'll be another podcast episode, just because that will bring us down a rabbit hole. It'll take us away from this.
that'll be chapter
But
two.
yeah, that'll be chapter two. Um, but I mean, I want to break down the uh the different levels of the pyramid, kind of individually amongst the subcategories, and kind of give examples of them so people understand it kind of on a more simplistic level.
All right. Well, I guess as a decent segue, you did mention that this could be hell, and
Yeah.
I would maybe not take it so far to the extreme, but say that as a general rule, life is suffering, especially when you look at pure nature. Um, again, we are animals, but luckily we've established a society in which we can build homes and food is readily available at grocery stores. But but yeah, if life is suffering, these physiological needs at the very base of Maslow's hierarchy are very crucial and essential to survival. Um, like no one can go too long without food, water, uh, rest, and yeah, and I guess you can take it from here, but yeah, these physiological needs are very essential to alleviating that suffering that we see in the world.
Um, Now, I don't want to get too deep into. I mean, I guess I could, approach it from a personal perspective, but um, when I think of like the bottom of the pyramid where it says physiological, food, water, warmth, rest, just addressing food alone, um, you hear a lot of arguments of, you know, you shouldn't tell people what they should or shouldn't consume. But I found, at least from my own experience, that um, the food and drink that you consume, it helps you feel physically a certain way. And I think that feeling that certain way will determine how you feel mentally and emotionally. And you're mentally and emotionally, you'll I think I think your mental and emotional state will determine how you feel as far as security and safety.
Actually, you're definitely not wrong. I honestly just take any vitamin deficiency as an example. Yes, you can always chow down on potato chips and soda and technically get all the caloric intake you need for the day, but you're not going to get your nutrition. And I know for my part, I can be very vitamin D deficient,
Mhm.
and I can feel very lethargic and depressed. And yeah, so if we don't get the nutrition we need from said food,
Mhm.
and then water's usually good for you anyway.
Yeah.
You will feel it if you don't get the nutrients you need from the food you take in. Um, so I'm never happy with the simple solution that calories in, calories out. I'm like, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Mhm.
Um, so and I guess on a health basis, get your fruits and vegetables and whole grains uh, inside you, and then you can eat, your, I guess, fats and starches
Yeah.
after you
Um,
get the nutrients.
I think it's safe to say, as far as vitamin D goes, I think you will get your yearly dose when we go to Atlanta,
I hope so.
because I think that we both came back from Atlanta last year with a healthy dose of vitamin D, with how much we were actually outside going from building to building. I mean, the caterpillars between uh the I don't know if they call them caterpillars, but the walkways between the hotels, they, prevented you from having to go outside, but there were still times that you had to. But
Mm,
I think it's safe to say that we're gonna have our share of vitamin D.
good. Because yeah, I've been trying to get outside more and do some gardening and that sort of thing, but every once in a while I have to find myself, uh, I don't know, drinking some sort of vitamin D enriched food
Yeah.
food source,
Um,
or actually supplements. So,
yeah. Um, y- I think we determined this before we started broadcasting. You can see the chat, right?
oh yes, yep.
You see who's in the chat right now?
Oh shit. No, it says private chat. Um,
Oh no, go up to the comments. I'm sorry, not the chat.
oh, oh crap. Where are the comments?
The comments are on the same side as private chat. Maybe
I don't. Yeah, I think you as a host see it.
that's weird, because James, that we met in Atlanta, is actually watching.
Hi. I can say his
um,
name, right?
yeah, yeah, um,
See my hand? Okay, yeah. Hi,
yeah,
James.
yeah. He actually just told me that, as far as Atlanta goes, he might be volunteering for Dragon Con this year instead of just going as a spectator.
Oh, I'm
I
I'm seriously considering that. That sounds like an awesome adventure.
Maybe for next year or the year after, because I think we need to do something big for next year as spectators, and then maybe 2021 we can go as volunteers. Um,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, I think that we need to make sure we get in uh, enough time as spectators, because there really is a lot that you can miss, as we found out last year. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot you can miss, so you don't want to leave there, you know, at the risk of sounding, stupid based on what we're talking about. You don't want to leave there feeling unfulfilled. Um, so it's all kind of a planning thing, as far as that.
My goal this year is to be self-actualized by the end.
Yeah. Or at least, at the very least, just not as stressed out.
Fair enough.
um, Now, um, I think we've determined that, how you feel mentally and emotionally is somewhat determined by, your food and water intake, like what you're eating, what you're drinking,
Yeah.
and that also can lead to the type of rest that you get, and your mental and emotional state can also depend or can also determine how you feel as far as your security and safety. Um, the third part of the pyramid is something that I struggle with, the belongingness and love and needs.
Hmm.
Um, I've spoken a lot. I don't know if I speak a lot or speak a lot about it in my videos because I don't know who watches my videos as far as, family, friends, or people that don't know me. So I may try to keep it out of my videos, but I'm not necessarily what I would call close with a lot of my blood family. Like my friends that I'm closest to are who I consider my family. Um, so relationships aren't necessarily easy for me. Like I can engage in conversation with anybody, but developing an actual relationship once I get to know somebody or somebody gets to know me, it seems more, at least within the last couple of years, it seems more along the lines of if somebody realizes that you don't have the same exact opinions, that a potential relationship can go to hell in a handbag. And so it's I mean, me being 34, as far as where it says, friends and intimate relationships, um, intimate relationships are a completely different beast for me. Um, because I've said for years that I've never really had, a legitimate intimate relationship to speak of because it's just something that's never been presented to me. But what I find very intriguing and somewhat troubling is that a lot of my friends come to me for relationship advice. And on the one hand, it bugs the hell out of me. But on the other hand, it just confuses me because I don't know why they're approaching me when I know I don't have the, the firsthand knowledge of it, but I seem to give them advice that works.
Well, I guess maybe being like an impartial third party, you you can probably offer a different perspective on
Mhm,
things, and maybe help them see things in a new way.
mhm,
And and again, I'm just guessing. I don't know what these conversations have entailed,
mhm,
but yeah, sometimes just being there can help change a person's state of mind. Like,
mhm,
uh, I mean, oftentimes they say, a hug is more than any advice or, uh, any words could offer. So if that stress is relieved in some way, maybe that gives them some clear thinking as well as whatever ideas you may offer uh, to maybe help them take the problem at a different angle.
mhm. What are your thoughts on people that come to you repeatedly for advice, but they actually legitimately tell you that they rarely take your advice? Like, it, does that kind of put a thought in your head as to what use am I if you're going to come to me for advice but not take my advice?
Yeah, part of it would be like, then why are you asking me? uh,
Yeah.
but other than that, maybe just talking to you maybe offers like a sense of comfort. So um, and again, that alone can be a stress reliever.
Mhm,
So maybe that's their primary reason to do it.
mhm.
Uh, but yeah, uh, I don't know. Yeah, that
Like,
is weird, but
one of the things that, we don't really touch on when you and I talk either, in this capacity or even just in a general everyday capacity, one of the things I don't think we've ever touched on, like, are your relationships with your friends, like, um, close relationships that you have with them. Like, do you have people that come to you for advice or that kind of rely on you or lean on you for certain things? And are there friends that you can go to for that type of, support?
uh, you know, I would say yes.
Hmm.
But also a lot of my friends are drama free, as am I. So there's not a whole lot of leaning any of us have to do. We just
If you're drama free, how the hell do you put up with me?
It is hard, but
Right
you
there.
got to work at it. But no, I mean, I'd like to think that if you know shit hits the fan,
Yeah.
to say, so to speak, I would have uh, you know a decent number of friends I could count on.
Hmm.
Actually, oddly enough, this isn't anything overly, uh, I guess, despairing or anything. But one time a flight was canceled uh, at midnight, and I didn't have a ride home because we got a ride to the airport.
Yeah.
Uh, but I needed a ride back after midnight. And so I put my feelers out, texting my friends, "Hey, is anyone awake? Can anyone give us a ride back to the
Hmm.
house?" Yeah, one of my friends was still awake, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll be there in like half an hour." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, thank you." So, and again, for the most part, I'm usually very self-reliant,
Yeah.
self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But in this case, I did need to reach out, and yeah, someone was there. So,
And I think for me, the self-reliant thing is something my mom has always raised me to be, is very, reliant on myself. But in my situation, unfortunately, there are still more times than I would like to admit where I have to rely on somebody else, or ooh, maybe not rely on them entirely, but they are a big part of, what I'm going to be doing. Like, they play a significant role in what I'm going to be doing. Um, so I think that is a struggle for me, um, because as much as I like to tout that I am self-reliant, there are still times where, especially, living in Virginia, I no longer have my own vehicle. So I always have to rely on other people to bring me places. Um, it'll be 6 years next month that I've been here in Virginia. That's 6 years that I've gone since I was 16 without having a car.
oof.
And so it's been an adjustment for me realizing that I had that, uh, freedom to be fully self-reliant, and now I have to rely on other people, which limits my ability to do a lot of things. Um, Case in point, going to Dragon Con. Like, you know, it's weird for me because I feel like, and this may be just in my head, and you can tell me if it's just in my head, but I feel like there's a sense of me relying on you because otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to Dragon Con. But it's also that I wanna have somebody there with me. Like, I could easily take a bus down, and I mean, I guess that would be me being self-reliant, um,
Hmm.
but I find it more comforting to have somebody familiar with me. And so reaching out to somebody who has a vehicle, on the one hand, it could make me look like I'm having to rely on somebody else, but in my mind, I'm reaching out to that person not because they have the means to get me where I want to go, but for the purpose of having them with me because there's somebody that I value having with me.
Well, I mean, I would argue everything's more fun with friends. So,
Yeah, but I mean, it just it's one of those things where the self-awareness comes into play. And with something like me, you know, leaning on you for the means of transportation in in respect to Dragon Con, it's always been in the back of my mind that I wanted to make sure that um you've never felt like I'm using you for a certain thing. So that's where self-awareness comes in for me. It's like, is that something irrational that I'm dwelling on, or is it actually an issue that it's just not being talked about kind of thing?
oh, I mean, I would argue it's a mutually beneficial uh, partnership or what have you. Uh, I mean, for one thing, I had never gone to Dragon Con before.
Hmm.
And then prior to last year, I hadn't seen you in 7 years. I
Yeah.
forget how long it had been.
Well, no, I think what it was the last time we had seen each other, you had come to New York, um, and had a beer with me just before I left.
Yeah,
So, um, it was just shy of 6 years because it was just shortly before, I left because like I said, next month it'll be 6 years that I've been in Virginia, and I know that you were in town in New York, shortly before I left, and we went out and had a drink and, caught up that way. But
yeah,
so it hadn't been, too many years, but it had been long enough to where we really needed to catch up.
definitely. And so I was up for a road trip, so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So,
Yeah. Um,
um, but
w
oh, go ahead.
as far as the security and safety, um, along the lines of being, self-sufficient, self-reliant, um, are there friends that you have that you feel more safe and secure around, or that potentially may feel safer and more secure around you?
Huh? That's a good question. I mean, for what it's worth, I since they're friends, I kind of always feel safe and secure around them.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's mutual. I hope.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, so I would say yeah, I probably feel more safe, and I would argue probably more, more comfortable
Mhm.
around them. Um, and I think I would consider that either probably within the safety needs or belongingness. That I'm using my friends, I feel comfortable and safe around them.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't and it's weird. I'm always in social situations, like, if I'm with friends, like, obviously, if we're hanging out in my apartment, there's no need for me to feel unsafe or insecure. But if we're in social situations, like, out in the public, I can't really say that there's a certain level of safety and security that I think of because, um, like, I know that the people I'm with aren't going to be a threat to me. but I don't know if they're going to be a safety net for me. I don't know if they're going to be capable of being a safety net for me in an instance where somebody that is, an outside variable comes in and affects the environment between myself and that friend. So it's like it's not that I don't trust them. It's like I don't know if they're going to be able to be that safety and security that I may need from, an outside variable.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, that's it's a good point, because the second step, the safety needs as well as belongingness and love needs, they're both very social needs.
Mhm,
Granted, you can argue, safety and security could just be as simple as a house with walls or, a fence or something. Um, but ultimately, you know, it depends on the general attitude of any given society. If your community is relatively safe and happy, there's no malice between members, then generally speaking, you're probably in pretty good shape.
mhm,
But then, of course, you may live in, like a bad part of town or something like that. And if there is some malice or like, gang warfare or something,
mhm.
um, and again, you're still living in a society, but that security is more elusive,
Yeah,
and it really depends. Yeah, it depends on the environment, that state of society in which you live,
yeah.
which is a sad fact. But some people can feel safe, you know, in their house, and others don't, just because of what's outside and beyond. And actually it's beyond their control. So you have to have it on faith that no one's going to kill you at night or yeah,
Um,
it's a little
do you
extreme,
do
but
you think that there are basic skills and knowledge that you have to be able to adapt to different environments that you experience so that you can feel a sense of safety and security? Because especially for somebody like me, I don't like to say that I'm at a disadvantage, but I know that being in a wheelchair and going into certain, different environments, I have to be able to easily and quickly adapt to different environments so that I know how to feel safe and secure around people I'm unfamiliar with, or um, geography and topography that I'm unfamiliar with, and just a general, overall environment that I'm not used to.
yeah, I mean, there are behaviors and actions you can take to help mitigate any uh harm or what have you. I mean, like back in the day when before we had GPS, we had these things called maps with like a drawing of the area on them. And
They
I
were
was
so big that you could lay down on them and have somebody trace your entire body. Yeah, I remember those.
yeah, those are good times.
Yeah.
But no, when you were traveling, they mentioned if you have to look at a map or a brochure or something, have your back against a building, so you can kind of look up and see whatever might be coming at you.
Mhm.
No one's going to get you from behind. Um, and then have your map ready, know where you want to look, where you want to go, and then keep moving.
Yeah.
And again, this is more like I was visiting New York City at the time, so
That
hey,
place is hell. You wanna talk about hell on earth, that place is hell. I visited there in 2003, and, it was right after no, it was right before Christmas, and people there were just not nice, like, they were not considerate of the other people around them, and I did not feel safe and secure there. Like, I would never go back.
yeah, I hate to say it, people add a lot of variability to any equation.
Mhm.
and there are a lot of people in New York City. So yeah, I'll leave it at
Um,
that. So,
just to give context as to what I'm referring to, um, at the time, I was actually interested in starting my own record company. And what mom had done for me was that she had planned a trip down to New York City, because we were going to see if we could get a tour of Arista Records, which Arista Records was the record label that at the time TLC, the girl group, the female R&B group, they were signed to Arista at the time, and so mom planned a trip down to New York City just so I could see the city for the first time, and um, we got to see Arista. We didn't get to do a tour, unfortunately, because we had kind of planned it wrong and didn't really get in touch with the right people, but that was fine. We got to actually go in and just kind of look around from a distance, sort of thing. Um, and what was weird was this was shortly after Lisa Lopez, the L in TLC, had passed away in Honduras. Um, but what was weird was we were told when we got there that we literally had just missed T-Boz and Chili, um, from the group. They had just been there.
oh,
And so I was all kinds of disappointed, but it was still an experience being there. But as we were coming out of the Arista building, um, we ended up going down the road a bit, and we were passing either the, I think it, is it called the theater where David Letterman had his show? Is it the David Letterman Theater, or is it called something else? You know what I'm talking about?
yeah. Hold on.
But we were passing that, like where they had the late night show, um,
The Ed Sullivan Theater.
Ed Sullivan Theater. Yeah, I because Ed Sullivan was before my time. That's why I couldn't remember the name. Um, we were passing by the Ed Sullivan Theater, about to be in front of um, the Hooters restaurant. We were about to be in front of Hooters, and all of a sudden, this very, very tall, large woman was walking toward me on her phone, and she wasn't paying attention to what was around her. And I don't know, I don't care how tall you are, if you're looking ahead, you can see in your peripheral what's above you, to the sides, or below you. I don't know how she missed me, but she was on her phone so engrossed in her conversation that she bumped into me walking straight forward and then looked at me like I had done something wrong. And I kind of looked at her and I'm thinking to myself, do you really want me to run your ass over? Because it's like, how dare you look at me like I'm the one that wasn't paying attention? But my overall experience in New York City was just bad. It was something I never want to do again. Um, but I'm curious, what was your experience, at least socially and personally, from going there?
Oh, uh, I had a good time.
Yeah.
I uh, I tried to make it a point to see all the major hotspots, at least superficially. Like
Yeah.
I think I walked past the UN. I went into FAO Schwartz. Uh,
You must have gone there before me then, because I don't know if FAO was still there when I went down.
I know they had been doing a renovation, and I think they were just finishing up or something. Because when I went, it didn't seem like this huge toy store that you think it would be. I mean, it was big, but I expected it to have like wall to wall toys and
Yeah.
a bunch of fun stuff around, and it was
Do you remember what year
kind
you
of
went?
sparse. 2005.
Oh, wow, so you went after me. I don't know why mom and I didn't go in FAO. That's weird. And I know you can't see the chat, but James just said, "How dare you not move out of her way? Didn't you see Her Majesty walking in your direction?" James, you can pound salt. I don't care. You can pound salt and quit flipping me off. I know. Um, but yeah, there were um I think I want to say the one thing that I remember going into as far as like a store type of thing, I think they still had like a Tower Records. Do you remember that from way back in the day?
Yeah, and I don't know where that is in New York City.
I don't think it exists anymore.
Oh,
It doesn't exist anymore. But I remember going into Tower Records and it was like a record store that it was, I think, 3 floors. I had never seen a record store that big.
dang.
Um, so it blew my mind. Um, the one thing, and this goes to, when we were going back to materialism, the one thing that I think irritated me, but I think it explains the cost of living um, in that area. We went into, I believe it was TGI Fridays, and we got food. And I shit you not, when we went there and ordered food, I almost had a heart attack, and not because of the food. Because I ordered a basic cheeseburger and fries. The cheeseburger alone was $16. And it's like, how on earth can you justify charging that much for a freaking cheeseburger? And like I said, I understand it's the cost of living there, which is why I could never live there. And actually, James just told me that Tower Records became Amazon. I did not know that.
Oh, that's so sad. Hmm.
That blows my mind. I did not know. Oh, wait, no, it's a question mark after that. I don't know if they
Oh,
became Amazon. Um,
so it's neutral. Let's see.
yeah, he has to phrase his questions differently because it sounded more like a statement than a question. And yes, James, I'm calling you out. um, but yeah, along the lines of, because one of the things that's been swimming around in my head is, at least for me, I know that it's been a big factor, um, and it really shouldn't be. The people that you surround yourself with, um, I wonder if your level of self-worth and like self-awareness and self-actualization, I wonder if those I wonder if the people that you surround yourself with have any effect on your own self-worth, self-actualization, self-awareness. Because I think that somebody else's level of those things will ultimately impact how they behave, and how they behave impacts how you behave. So I hate the whole concept of a chain reaction, but that's literally the only way I can describe it.
Well,
Because I know that I've always had I've had this bad habit of kind of attracting very damaged people. Like, most of the women that I've always been attracted to have been damaged in some way, like mentally and emotionally. And I think that it tends to affect me and my level of self-awareness and, how I see myself.
yeah. For what it's worth, the people you do hang around definitely influence you.
Mhm.
Um, I would say, depending on how steadfast you are in your beliefs, your self awareness, uh, what have you, they can change you faster or slower depending on how you let them.
Mhm.
But yeah, God, I mean, I hate to say it. There comes a point when parents have a little, not so much control over their children, and then the domain becomes their friends. Who
Yeah.
they choose to hang out with, and that can change who they are, or their behavior at least. Um, and so
I'm
it may take some adapting to either change them back or change further or what have you. So
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to remember around what time my mom may have felt like, uh, she was starting to be less of an influence on me. Not maybe not less of an influence, but not as strong as of an influence, because she's always been, a very prominent influence on me because it's literally been, me and her. Like, we are very close, but, it because I know that there were times, like, friends that I've had for, you know, almost 2 decades. Like, there were times when we were younger where my mom would be very critical of them and say, "I don't think that this person is a good influence on you." Now, some of those people are, the ones that my mom loves the most, like my friends that my mom loves the most. But I have to wonder when, um when my mom may have started feeling like she wasn't the sole influence on me, because there are a lot of people now that I, and I say this loosely, are an influence on me or have an impact on me. um, Not in the sense of being able to manipulate the way I think or the way that I behave, but they are more like, they teach me more things, like, for instance, like, I feel like, like with you when you said something to the effect of, it depends on how strong you are in your beliefs and your morals and values, how you let people affect you. Like, I wouldn't say that you have necessarily changed anything about me, but I think that the type of relationship that we have and the strength therein, it has made me a better communicator, because I don't think I've ever expected somebody to believe the things that I believe, because that's just stupid. But I think that having somebody like yourself that's willing to push back on things, I think that makes me understand people a lot better. Um,
good.
because, like I've said, over the past almost 2 years, this whole journey of me being on YouTube is something that I've taken as trying to understand the human condition and trying to understand the humans around me. And I think I'm just more aware of who I surround myself with now, um, because I realize that there are healthy ways to push back on certain beliefs that people have, and I realize there are very unhealthy ways, and people that still have that propensity for, pushing back in the unhealthy ways, are slowly dropping out of my life because they don't know how to intellectually, you know, form an idea, form a thought, or, present an idea like, you and I have.
Rule of thumb: always start with proof. That's what I do.
Yeah.
But that's interesting though, because you alluded to, uh, people who influence
Mhm.
us, and I mean, belongingness is a part of that. Like, if we want to belong to something, sometimes we change just for the
Yeah.
sake of belonging, which can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing.
I think it depends on how drastically you change, because I think there is a healthy um, line between, you know, kind of changing your way of thinking and then changing yourself. Because I think that if you change your way of thinking, it's fine as long as you don't compromise who you are morally and ethically.
Yes. I would argue the more information you have can alter your thinking.
Hmm.
Um, and then you have to decide, is that enough to change my behavior? And
Hmm.
is that behavior moral, or is it just logistical, or, there are a lot of things that can be inconsequential, others that are
Hmm.
very uh, integral to the workings of society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would argue with this hierarchy of needs, as long as self betterment is always that primary motivation, I don't think you can go too wrong,
Hmm.
or deviate too much from the path. But yeah, I would always keep your eye on that peak
Hmm.
of the pyramid, or the proverbial mountain,
Yeah.
of self actualization, because that
Hmm.
ultimately is what you are aiming for.
Yeah.
You're aiming for a better self.
Hmm.
And if the people you surround yourself with can help you in any way,
Hmm.
then so be it. That'll just provide further steps for you to climb.
Right.
But if it hinders you, um,
Well, what if I say that steps hinder me?
oh, wait, what?
What if I say that steps hinder me? It's supposed to be a joke. Went over.
Oh,
You're taller than me, and it went over your head.
okay. So you said it with such gravitas. I was like, oh wait, I gotta switch the screen. I gotta see the look on his face. And then when I saw the smile, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a joke. Okay.
Oh, so you're not looking at me. I see how it is. See, I have screens minimized so that I can have each of my screens. I see how it is.
Oh shoot, I just have tabs. Yeah, my bad. But
um,
but
yeah,
you get the idea. So I
yeah,
mean, um, you shape the path by how you form your surroundings, and
yeah,
people are definitely an exterior force
yeah.
in this whole thing. So
What do you,
external.
in your opinion, what do you do when you are a certain way for so long because of the people that are around you, but you then when you start to surround yourself with different people, you become a different version of yourself, and you get backlash from those that first group. Like, to give context, when I was in middle school and high school, I was more often than not, I was the comic relief for everybody. People that were feeling shitty or feeling down on themselves used to rely on me to be the comic relief to kind of bring them up. But people wouldn't take me seriously when I was trying to have a serious conversation with them. So when I started to surround myself with more intellectual people that I could have a serious, more mature conversation with, I had a lot of my friends lashing out at me, saying that I had become angry and too serious and this, that, and the other. It's like, no, I'm just kind of evolving, and I want to explore other, thoughts and concepts in my head.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, hell, we're literally talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which entails growth
Yeah.
and personal evolution, I'll say. And I mean, I hate to say it, every person is a very dynamic and complicated piece of work,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. And yeah, people do change with time and experiences. And hell, like I'm not the person I was 15 years ago,
Yeah.
say. And I, I would argue, I think one of the best examples I can think of for kind of the dynamic you're describing is like Jon Stewart. Again, he was the host of the Daily Show for like what 15 years or something.
Yeah.
So he was this comedic figure, poking fun at the news and that sort of thing. But then he also grew to have this uh, gravitas, and could become very serious
Hmm.
about serious issues.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's what I think made him so appealing, that when it was appropriate, he could be hilarious and funny and, not take things too seriously. But then when things changed and did become more serious,
Yeah.
he was very able to,
Adapt.
yes, to adapt and to move people on an emotional level.
And it's
Uh,
it's funny you mentioned Jon Stewart specifically because I don't know if you've been following the news a lot. Um, a couple of months ago, he was in front of Congress trying to get the 9/11 Victims Fund, or the First Responders Fund, to help those who had gotten sick from being first responders at Ground Zero.
hmm,
He went in front of Congress to say, we need funding for these people because they don't have the right health insurance or enough money to cover all of the health issues that they've incurred since 9/11. And like, I've never seen this man get emotional, like angry, sad. Like, I've never seen him go through the range of emotions that I've seen before. Um, and like, he was passionate about it, like he has been for probably, I think they like the past 14 years or something. He's
yeah.
been he's been fighting for this, and it just came out recently that um, they put it to a vote in Congress, and Rand Paul from Kentucky blocked it because he was unsure how they were going to pay for it. And let me tell you something. I realize that Jon Stewart is not somebody you want to piss off, because shortly before they put it to a vote, the one of the guys that they had at the first hearing had actually passed away since then. So there was more of a sense of urgency to get it passed.
Yeah.
And so when Rand Paul blocked it because he didn't know how they were going to pay for it, Jon Stewart went off. Like, he was on any news outlet that would have him, and he was ripping Rand Paul up one side and down the other. And Rand Paul finally responded with the most absurd response I have ever heard. He basically discredited John, saying, he has heart, but he's a comedian. He doesn't understand politics. And it's like, dude, you don't know what he understands because you don't know him.
Yeah.
And it's like Rand Paul has a history of blocking things because he doesn't know how they're gonna pay for them. And it's like, I guess the argument was that Rand Paul had always fought against, I guess, balancing the budget, but now that there was something that Rand Paul wasn't interested in, he was now interested in burying it by saying, let's balance the budget and we can't afford this. So he was flip flopping. And like I said, I've never seen fire in Jon Stewart's eyes. But I guess within the last couple of days, Congress finally passed the 9/11 First Responders Fund, to where I guess it's funded until 2090.
Oh, damn. That's a good
Yeah,
chunk of time.
yeah,
Uh, and it's, I hate to say it. And again, I'll last political statement of the evening. Um,
Well, no,
but
and I don't think we're going political, but I mean, it fits into what we're talking about. So
yeah, but I would just say it seems like nowadays we have more leaders outside of DC than we do in DC. And
yeah, we have people that embody the definition of a leader.
yeah, and
And we just have a bunch of office monkeys in DC.
yeah,
We have a bunch of office monkeys that have fallen from the trees too much, and they've got brain damage, and they forgot how to function. No, I'll definitely agree with that.
yeah.
Um,
So
but okay, we got kind of derailed. I forgot where we were going before I mentioned John Stewart.
we were on the third phase, the third section of belongingness and love needs.
Yeah,
Um,
but I think that within the context of that part of the pyramid, I think that you know John Stewart is a good example of people that he didn't even know personally, but had gotten to know that he was fighting for. And it's like he could have also been fighting for people that he hadn't met yet.
yeah,
That and that I think is what shows strength in relationships. You don't have to know every minute detail about somebody to care about them.
no, if someone's suffering, it's our job as social beings to help mitigate that suffering. And again, if you want to relate it to Maslow's hierarchy, it's these physiological needs, and health is one of them.
Yeah.
So if someone is suffering, yeah,
Well, I would argue that the entire pyramid is, something that promotes better health.
yeah, and again, at the very basis, physical health, and then
Yeah.
as you go up, it's more mental health.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, and if someone is suffering at any phase,
Mhm.
it is our job as social beings to help take care of those who are suffering.
Yeah.
And actually, if you want to argue, that could be part of the self-actualization
Yeah.
peak. It's self-fulfillment when you're helping others
And I
to.
I think that comes along with, my strong interest in nonprofit work because I'm always, and I mean, sometimes it has kind of bitten me in the ass, but I'm more the type to reach out to somebody to try to help them without expecting something in return. But I've got to learn when, because in my opinion, I'm starting to learn that there are times where you should expect something in return. Um, in most cases, I would say, do something just for the good of humanity.
Mm,
But there are times where you really should expect something in return, or at least do something for somebody who will eventually come around and, reciprocate.
yeah,
Because I think that damages your, your self-worth if you just keep giving of yourself and not being around people that are willing to reciprocate, not expecting them to, but knowing that they will.
yeah. Because I mean, I hate to say it, there are people out there who are very willing to take advantage. And when that happens too often, you become a doormat, and that can start hurting you psychologically.
Hmm.
Again, you lose your confidence, you lose your self worth, and that could essentially, you know, take you down a few pegs
Yeah,
as far as the Maslow's hierarchy goes. And it drives you back down to, I guess probably, the basic needs section, the physiological and the safety
yeah,
needs, where you no longer feel like you belong anywhere, you don't feel loved. So yeah, that hurts quite a bit, and you have to work hard to get your mind out of that gutter and
yeah.
keep on trudging along. And it
Um,
can be tough.
yeah. With the second to last section before we get to the top. Um, I want to cover that before I touch on something that you just said about being derailed. Um, Self-esteem. The
Hmm.
It says prestige and feeling accomplished. Now, I think that there are, at least in my interpretation, there are ways that you can go about that that are positive and negative, because I think that you can go about it a healthy way and just appreciate the accomplishments that that you have for yourself. But I also think that there needs to be a self-awareness so that you don't develop a an ego in the sense that it affects other people.
Yeah, I would argue there is a big difference between a toxic and a non-toxic self-esteem,
Yeah.
ego, however you want to phrase it. Um, yeah, I hate to say it, but you can see this in today's world.
Mhm.
Obviously,
Oh yeah.
uh, I mean, I like to think, I don't know, maybe half of Wall Street is like this toxic, high self-esteem, but they're in it for the money. They aren't doing too much socially, to better society. It's just,
But to push back on that a little, the way that you view others, doesn't that say, I mean, I've always heard that says more about you than those people. So,
yeah,
I mean, if you view somebody negatively just based on things that you hear and don't necessarily know as fact, doesn't that affect you more than it affects that person that you're negatively projecting toward?
conceivably, if it's a false accusation, then yeah, it would reflect on you. But again, I mean, well, I should probably pick another example.
I know where it was written right across your forehead where you were going with that. I know where you were going with that.
Sorry. So I would argue, if someone is evil and malevolent, like Jafar from Aladdin,
Yeah.
a fictional example as opposed to a real life one, I think we can all agree that he was an asshole. Uh, and I don't think it would denigrate your character or your persona or what have you in any way, because objectively speaking, yeah, he was trying to oppress people and take power all for himself and that sort of thing.
Wouldn't I would argue though he may have had a noble reason for the goal that he was trying to achieve. He may have just been going about it the wrong way.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, everyone is deserving of compassion. Um, but if I mean, because I mean, don't uh,
I don't even know if it's deserving of compassion, but at least understanding a more dynamic understanding, because we only know what the story told us. So we don't
yeah,
really know the other side of it, because they say there's two sides to every story. So we could look at somebody and the way that they're going about doing something in our mind could negate the goal that they're trying to achieve. Whereas, going back to relying on one's resources that they have available to them, they may only have a certain amount of resources available to them, and they're trying to accomplish that goal that may be a noble goal, but they're trying to accomplish it with the resources that they're afforded. So the way that they're going about it may appear in a negative, make them appear in a negative light, but what they're actually trying to accomplish is something noble. They're just limited by their resources and not really being given, the chance to seek better resources to, you know achieve it in a better way. I mean, I think it's all an optics type of thing. it it's all based on optics, like how it looks. And I think that's
Conceivably,
kind of superficial.
but I like I'm very anti-consequentialist as far as morality goes. So I'm a little biased in that regard. But
You
I
say anti-consequentialist. What does that mean? I'm not entirely sure I know where you're going.
okay, so consequentialism as a moral philosophy is it's the end goal that determines the rightness or wrongness of an action. And I in a society, it's very precarious to live by that philosophy because if if killing 500,000 people will bring about world peace, is it worth it?
You had to bring Thanos into this, didn't you?
Yeah, because that's a consequentialist dilemma. Um, because I if you're bringing the deaths of, I guess, anyone, um, is that the right action to take to bring about world peace for everyone? Uh, be-
But if you think about it, though, I mean, yes, the actions that Thanos took were very, very aggressive and very, very extreme. But if you, one of the things that he said was, if you look at those worlds that he has already done that to, they're starting to thrive again. And it granted, you have to look at it from the perspective they're probably not actions that you would take, but it was the only way that he knew how to help them. I'm not saying what how he went about it was right because it's not something I would do, but I think there has to be a level of understanding as to what he had at his disposal to be able to help them. And yes, you know, sacrifices have to be made to for an ultimate positive outcome.
I would agree that sacrifices must be made, but do they have to be lives or the well-beings of people in order for that to happen? Like I would argue the war effort in World War II, like every one of us in the States, we had to sacrifice uh, our quality of life a little bit in order to give resources to the war effort. And I think that ultimately is probably a more noble cause.
To put it into like a real world perspective, um, I don't remember what country this guy is the ruler of. Um, Duterte, uh, the one that he he became controversial because he was killing drug dealers and drug lords because he didn't want the distribution of drugs in his country. Now, I understand where people don't want death to accomplish something, but if he didn't see a path to the extinction of the drug problem other than completely getting rid of these drug dealers and drug lords, then he was working within the resources that he had.
Yes, and also the Philippines, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
and I think my reason for looking at it from that perspective is there was a class that we took in high school where it wasn't like a criminal justice thing, but you did mock trials. And even if you were assigned, you know, say you were assigned the prosecutor role, you had, even though you were going to be the prosecutor in that scenario, you had to present to the teacher your argument in defense of the defendant. So you had to look at things from both sides. So I think there just has to be a level of understanding And if you have a level of understanding as to the purpose of why somebody's doing something, maybe you can better educate them as to how to accomplish it.
True. The one thing that puzzles me about the Duterte example is that he's the president of the Philippines.
Right.
So he has the option to encourage laws and change public opinion and that sort of thing. Why did he go so quickly toward the death penalty for uh,
Okay, if you want to look at it from, creating laws and, enacting law and order, look at the things that are happening in, um, where is it? I think it's out west, somewhere in Washington State, where Antifa is. They just attacked a journalist because he was reporting on a gathering that they were at. They literally started throwing everything they could at him, and now he has um, a brain bleed. He has to live with a brain bleed now. And the reason I bring that up is because when this happened, they were right in front of the Justice Center in Portland. Yeah, it was in Portland. Maybe it was in Oregon. I don't know. It was out west, but it was in Portland, and they were right in front of the Justice Center when they started attacking him. None of the police came to his aid, even though they were there watching it happen. And the only time they came to his aid was when he was sitting up against a building, recording it on his phone, talking about what had just happened. And they did nothing to these demonstrators that brutally beat him. So
yes.
you can't. I don't think the argument can be made that laws work, because laws only work to suppress the people that are going to abide by those laws.
But then the other argument would be, does violence work? And apparently not.
Well, obviously it does, because violence is what's scaring. I think it's the mayor of Portland actually um, has taken measures to protect the people of Antifa, because he said that they're just exercising their right to protest, even though they have committed criminal acts. He has openly defended them and made sure that they were free of prosecution.
I mean, as long as they're not destructive or violent or anything, then
Watch,
technically,
well, watch any video of anybody that has caught Antifa on video. They are violent. That's what they are.
well, okay, but also, is that all of them or just a select few of assholes who actually,
Well,
riot
the
and
thing is, the people that claim that they are Antifa are the ones that you see being very violent. I know what you're doing. You're pushing back without knowing what I'm talking about. You
and
need you have to admit you don't seek out a lot of the information, because I know that you've said that you want to believe that Antifa has noble views or noble reasons for what they do, but they've literally are on the FBI list of domestic terrorists. They are listed as a domestic terrorist group because they do not show up to an event without being violent.
and and I guess I do have to read the statistics because I want to know how many of the Antifa
It
group.
doesn't matter. It does not matter. Antifa is listed as a domestic terrorist group because of the actions. It doesn't matter if there are, you know, if everybody that calls themselves Antifa, it doesn't matter if every one of them is violent. It's the ones that you see that are taking these actions that define the entire group.
But it shouldn't, though. It has to be representative.
But what I'm saying is, what Antifa is, the way that Antifa defines themselves, because the quiet members of Antifa that do like um the the peaceful protests, they don't come out and disavow the violent Antifa members because they don't want to be attacked themselves. So I think if you're part of a larger group and you have a small portion of that group that are acting out in violence, if you don't come out and disavow that violence, then you're just as guilty as them. So I would blanket statement the entire group that they are a domestic terrorist because there are members of that group that don't speak out against the violent ones.
Mm. And that they need to take that on themselves. That's
But when you
you need to
have
denounce
but
violence.
when you have government officials in Portland and you have law enforcement officials in Portland that have openly, you know, acted in defense of Antifa, they don't need to be in office because they're not coming out and denouncing the violence that's happening. The
Mm.
only reason that anybody is aware of what happened to Andy No, the journalist who was attacked and beaten, is because of so many people in the YouTube community passing around the video that he took of his attack. Because the only reason, because it was never covered by the mainstream media until there was so much heat on that story that he ended up going on Fox News and going on ABC, NBC, MSNBC, all of those that were ignoring it and have openly supported or never disavowed Antifa and what they do because the evidence is out there.
And
Um,
yeah, I wish the violence would end because that that doesn't help anyone's cause.
no,
I'm sorry to say.
but not to get too far off topic because we have a tendency to go down rabbit holes, but to circle back to the difference between having a healthy level of self-esteem and a toxic version of self-esteem. I think that healthy level of self-esteem, you still have the ability to have compassion for others, and you're not boisterous and braggadocious, where you can be in a certain way as long as it doesn't harm others. And I think that when you get to that other side, it becomes very dangerous for others. Like, you become a threat to others when it starts entering that negative territory of you know having too much self-esteem to where you think that you can act in a certain way without consequence.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head because as uh, if you want a healthy self-esteem, you essentially have to develop yourself as a social being.
Yeah,
That you are a part of society, you have a role to play, as does everyone else. And there's this sort of appreciation for the self as well as other people.
yeah.
So I would call that a nice, healthy level of self-esteem.
Hmm. um
So,
and I will. James is typing, hold on.
ooh.
Healthy equals I'm good, others can be good, we all can get better. Unhealthy, I'm the best. That actually, in layman's terms, that sums it up. When you are very, you know, self-absorbed as opposed to self-aware. Because I think that when
Hmm.
you're self-aware, you can look at your life from a third-party perspective. Um, or not a third party perspective, but an outside perspective. If you can look in on your life and the statements that you make and the actions that you take, if you can look in, I think that is a healthy level, I think that is self-awareness, because I think to have self-awareness, you have to be aware that you are not the only person that exists.
Mm. And I would argue, actually, maybe there's uh, another version of an unhealthy self-esteem is where you compare yourself to others and you think yourself not as worthy as someone
Oh
else.
shit, I do that all the time.
That's like the
I don't. That's lack of self-esteem, though. Like, I don't think that. I
oh,
mean,
okay, yeah, that would
the argument could be made that it is an unhealthy level of self-esteem, but I think it's the absence of self-esteem. So I think
yeah.
the absence of self-esteem is dangerous to oneself, whereas I think too much self-esteem can be dangerous and harmful to the people around that one person.
That's fair. I'll agree to that. And yeah, I would say it's probably that fourth level, the esteem needs, that we really have to work hard at,
Hmm.
because this is where
It's a balancing act, and
yeah.
I think that we forget that life in and of itself is a balancing act. But when it's broken down into this pyramid, I think that we can recognize that it's more of a balancing act, but I think that we have to consciously approach it as such.
Yeah, man, because this and then again, as you go up the pyramid, it becomes much more a mental exercise. And yeah, these esteem needs really have an effect on. Okay, yeah, I guess the self-actualization part definitely, but then it can kind of bleed through to other uh, steps as well for other people,
Hmm.
and it's yeah, because you need to you have to have that self-worth in order to move up the pyramid as well as help everyone else
Hmm.
kind of take their steps that they
Yeah,
need to reach the top of the pyramid.
yeah.
And yeah, this is where the self encounters the obstacles of the mind as well as society. So,
One,
whew,
it took me a second. I was trying to remember what I wanted to get to before we got to the last part of the pyramid, but it just reminded me. Um, what, if anything, in the first four levels do you think would like approach can you, in your opinion, can you approach any of the first four levels in a way which would derail you from getting to the top of the pyramid at at a specific speed or time period? Like, if you know that you need to accomplish A, B, C, and D to get to E, and you know how much time it's going to take, are there things that you believe can derail you and keep you from getting ultimately to that top spot in a timely manner?
oh yeah. So for some people, it may take a lifetime to be self-actualized. Others may be self-actualized at I don't know 15 or what have you. Um, but yeah, and again, it's very subjective. But yes, anyone can be derailed, and a prime example would be any mental illness.
Yeah.
I would argue.
But in your opinion, are there specific examples within the first four levels that you can think of that would derail you from ultimately getting to the self-actualization on time?
Yeah. Physiological needs, poverty. Safety needs, wartime. Belongingness, betrayal of friends.
Hmm.
Esteem needs. I guess mental illness. That'd probably be where it would stop you the most at that point.
Hmm.
But again, those mental illnesses may either be biological, kind of, I guess, as part of the physiological needs,
Yeah.
or it may be environmental, where you didn't feel like you belonged, or you felt betrayed by your friends, or something like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, people suffering from PTSD, depression, anxiety, uh, what else? Schizophrenia, uh, the whole gamut of
Mhm.
mental illness. It that is a very big and significant obstacle toward approaching self-actualization, because every day, not only are you trying to function as an adult in daily life, but you're also fighting another battle in your head.
Mhm.
So every day is this battle on two fronts that you're trying to win, or at least sustain yourself. And it is quite the endeavor. And I admire anyone who has to fight those battles.
Um, Give me 1 second. Um, with Do you feel like within the subcategories of each heading, um, do you feel like every one of those is necessary, or can you get to the top without certain ones? Because I'm going back to what we referenced earlier, um, as far as not necessarily having a legitimate intimate relationship to speak of. Do you think that an intimate relationship is necessary for this?
Oh, actually, you bring up a good point, because this is actually one of the criticisms of Maslow's hierarchy, the placement of intimacy, and I take it. Do you mean sexual relationships?
Well, I mean, intimacy on any level. I mean, I do believe that I do believe that intimacy is not, it's not entirely sexual. I believe that there are many ways you can be intimate without it being sexually driven, but I mean that is part of it. But in the context of intimate relationships, I'm are they necessary to feel completely fulfilled?
I, for my part, I would argue no, just because, uh, okay, for multiple things. Because you can feel, I'd say, intimate with very close friends. Like if you have a good support group, you have, uh, a cordiality, comradeship, I guess, yeah, camaraderie. Um, and you, like, again, you feel like you belong. Uh, Intimacy may not be for everyone, and biologically, uh, sex. If you want to put it in the physiological needs, I would say that'd be for the sake of continuing the species. Um, and if you put sex within the belongingness and love needs, I would say again, yeah, maybe like intimate relationships. But again, this is going to sound really weird, but of all the of all the biological systems of the
Mhm.
body, the reproductive system is the only one that you could extract from any life form, and they could live an outwardly normal life. Um,
Right, and I mean that's very evident when, um, if any feminist ever sees this podcast, I'm probably going to get my ass handed to me by saying this, but when you have a female who needs to get a hysterectomy, ultimately that is the removal of the female reproductive organs for medical necessity. So yes, and I think without humans can live without reproductive organs, but the human race could not. They could not exist past the humans that already exist.
Yeah, which is why I would argue sex belongs in physiological needs for the purpose of continuing the species, whereas if you want to put sex in the belongingness and love needs, it's just choice. It's not necessary to achieve self-actualization. Um, I mean, I would argue, look at the traditional Jedi, and again, fictional characters, but they had to forego, I guess, intimacy or love or whatever in order to achieve, the Jedi Master or that sort of thing. So there's that distance that they kind of have to carry with themselves, but that itself is part of their self-actualization.
Yeah,
If you want to become a Jedi Master, you have to forego some of these other needs in order to achieve this higher level for yourself.
because James actually just typed in and made a good point. Um, I think the absence of something will, if you want to fulfill something, the absence of what you think is necessary can ultimately make you find something to fill that void. Like if you do not have properly working reproductive system, um, you're unable to produce children. That means that you would have to adopt. So the absence of a working reproductive system forces you to kind of improvise in the face of wanting children by adopting. And with me, I don't know why I'm putting this out on the internet, but I don't know.
It's the internet.
I legitimately do not know if I am capable of being sexually active. Like, I don't, because I know that there are things that I would have to consider medically before I became sexually active. So I think that I look at intimacy a different way because I know that sexual intimacy is probably not something that is a tangible thing for me. It's not something that would be achievable. But um, something that James said, I want to put it up on the screen and see if I can. Um, he makes a good point because do you see that?
Oh wow, yeah.
Says, I think intimate relationship just means the ability for shared experience to enhance the reality of an event. I think that this encapsulates, what my train of thought as far as I think that experiences can be an intimate thing. You know, I think that there's intimacy in everything. Intimacy is not subjugated specifically to being sexually active with somebody.
Yeah, and that's definitely a fair assessment. I would say, for going along this definition, platonic intimacy, and honestly, yeah, and like I alluded to earlier, everything is better with friends. So yeah, when you share an experience or share a life with someone else, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual. Like I have amazing friends, and I'm like, yeah, let's hang out. Let's like board
But
gaming night can be intimate.
and not to get too personal, but has there ever been somebody that you have imagined yourself being in a long-term intimate relationship with and not necessarily looked at it from a sexual perspective, but looked at it as intimacy in the form of just bettering the lives of each other?
Oh, yeah, like I would argue, like most of my family,
Well,
most of my friends.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about somebody that you can be in a lifelong relationship with, like somebody that you don't have to be that you can. share intimacy with and be in a relationship with in the context of, you know, a traditional relationship, but not have to worry about sexual intimacy being a thing.
Ah,
Because there are plenty of women that I have been attracted to that if sexual intimacy were, you know, a, a guaranteed thing with me, I wouldn't even worry about it. But knowing that there is that question of sexual intimacy, I don't use that to determine if I'm going to be in a relationship with somebody. Like that's not the first thing that I think about. I think about, you know, can they expand my view of life? Can they expand, you know, my way of thinking? Can they be as healthy for my brain as they can my heart? That to me is intimacy because it's
okay.
reaching into the deeper parts of, you know, what a human is. If you're able to reach into the deeper parts of what a human is, that to me is intimacy.
Okay, then I would say, uh, I think I have a few friends that I could do that with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as of now, uh, I'm enjoying being alone. So, uh, I'm not exactly too gung ho about uh getting too close with anyone. But yeah, I enjoy sharing experiences with people, and uh, and again, I probably should get out of the house more. But yeah,
I think that goes for both of us.
but yeah, I like honestly like going to an art museum and talking at length about the life of the artist, or the full piece, or the symbolism, or what it means to us, or that sort of thing. I think uh that's a good, I guess, mental intimacy
Well,
example.
I think to break it down, at least from my perspective, you know how art is meant to evoke emotion?
Hmm.
I think that anything, if you are with somebody who is able to evoke emotion from you or share in an emotion that you have, I think that is intimacy.
Okay, yeah, and and bear with me.
It's like from my perspective, going to a concert with somebody. If I'm physically attracted to somebody and it's somebody that I am actively trying to get to know, I want to see where a level of intimacy can be built upon. So I would, you know, for me, I would take them to a concert because music evokes emotion from me. So I want to see if their emotions are similar to the emotions that I have with a certain band that I'm connected to.
Okay, so you're talking about like jiving emotional
Yeah,
states.
and I think that for me, that's intimacy.
Okay. Well, I guess for my part, I might need to work on that a little more, because I try to keep things.
I don't know. I think you could find an intimate partner for life going to a Weird Al show. You could find somebody right up your alley, dude.
Hmm. I've been told, similarly with like either like at a steampunk convention or Dragon Con.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
You just want to make sure that people that you meet in the context of a convention aren't jiving with you one dimensionally because
yeah.
once you're not in that environment, you want to make sure that there's enough to sustain a relationship outside of that environment because there was an individual that you and I were talking about recently that we met at Dragon Con who I found out was not like she presented herself at Dragon Con. she was very much an angry, hostile individual. And it's like you want to make sure that the person you see in a specific environment is at least somebody that is um the same in each environment. Like you want to make sure that their overall general characteristics can adapt within different environments.
Yeah, I would argue. Uh, okay, so character in the philosophical sense, like who you are as a person, your moral aptitude, that sort of thing. That's usually fairly
Across the board.
in stasis, yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm at a Dragon Con or a steampunk convention or something, and if I'm playing someone, like deep down, my moral, my political, my spiritual beliefs aren't going to change a whole lot. It's just going to be my depiction of the self. Like, ooh, I'm
Right.
wearing a
But
crazy hat now.
but you know, in the context of that person that we know from Dragon Con that I found out was very different from who she portrayed herself as, um, it, does it then, if you see that person again in that environment, does it drive you away from wanting to interact with them because you know how they really are outside of that environment? Because I know that this person is going to be back there, and it makes me, because I know how hostile of an individual she is in general settings, it makes me not even want to be around her.
Well, luckily it's Atlanta. It's a big area with like 80,000 plus people. So
True.
we're probably going to be in pretty good shape. But but I hate to say it, realistically speaking, everything changes everything else. So when you get just a little bit more knowledge of something, it's going to change your opinion of something at least a little.
Yeah,
So,
just for me to get some perspective because I'm curious, and I know that, I'm comfortable asking you this because I know you're going to give me, you know, a proper answer instead of something that will, you know, just be something for the purpose of a reaction. Are there times where you have seen different aspects of my personality that haven't jived or haven't, been consistent?
well, okay, I guess honestly, sometimes you post some very
Well, I'm not talking about things that I post because
oh,
I'm talking about, in the context of, my personality. Have you seen things about my personality that haven't been consistent from one environment to the other?
uh,
Because I think it's safe to say that we feel a little bit safer posting things online about what we really think as opposed to saying them in mixed company because we don't really want that confrontation because we know people in general would be very aggressive in their approach. So I think it's bad to base it on things that I post online because you and I can have fundamental disagreements and still be very adult in discussing where we are on certain issues. Whereas, me with other people, people have up and deleted me and excommunicated me from their life simply because we have a different view of something.
mm,
So I mean, I don't think that's a good comparison to use with posting.
all right. I mean, honestly, uh, there's not a whole lot of inconsistency. Um,
So
I
I'm
mean,
just consistently a prick.
yeah.
You realize you're going to see me in a few weeks, right?
Yes, but I'm driving. So,
Touche. um, yeah. So if you could kind of wrap it up and put a bow on it, what do you think, to summarize Maslow's theory, what do you think someone has to do to be a more well-rounded person and be healthy about it as far as other people around them, like how they portray themselves to other people?
Well, okay. So in order, oh yeah, okay. I would say, uh, and again, without any, you know, psychological jargon or anything, because actually I don't know much, but people who say they try to be a better person every day, better than the person they were yesterday. That kind of mentality, I think that is probably the most succinct uh, summation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
But do they try, or do they just say that they try? Because I think that the statement "actions speak louder than words," I think that's very, very, relevant, because people can say anything, but I think that people's actions will speak louder.
Yeah, that's true. But then I hate to say it, the actions of the everyday person is get up, go to work, do work, come home, sleep.
Yeah, so it's basically, a very robotic existence.
I hate to say it, but yeah, that's what.
Do you think that the people that have the ability to exist outside that robotic routine, do you think that they are the ones that are probably more capable of achieving Maslow's hierarchy?
It depends. For people who can consistently find distractions from life, like when when you're off of work and you find something to entertain yourself, or forget about life for a while. I mean, which again is necessary. That I would put that somewhere on the hierarchy.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say, since this is more of a human development exercise, the
Hmm.
whole hierarchy,
Yeah,
um, it's very psychological.
yeah.
So hypothetically, if I were to get up, go to work, come home from work, sleep, um, the moments in between those things is where I can help. I guess my mind to kind of become more self-aware, become more of a social being, become a more moral person.
Hmm.
That is within your control. So if I'm living an outward life that's very robotic, and I'm making an income and paying my bills like every other human being, um,
Are you
then
that to me is existing instead of living.
exactly that's
Yeah,
existing.
yeah.
But the part that I do in my mind, that is in my control. How I treat people, how I um, how I create things in my own life.
Hmm.
That's all on me. My circumstances aside, that probably doesn't play as big a part in the hierarchy as my own behavior, my own mind, within the context of my free time.
Hmm.
So I would say that is the crucial point.
Hmm.
Again, you have to be realistic, because people do have bills to pay, and I do have to put food on the table and
Right.
get those needs as
So
I.
robotic routines are necessary in some context, but you have to, like we said earlier, have a healthy balance of things to be fulfilled.
Yeah, if I'm constantly seeking distractions outside of what I have to do, then there's no inner exercise happening.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, like I love playing video games and watching movies and that sort of thing. Um, but I need to know when to cut myself off in order to develop myself as a social being, personal
Right.
responsibility, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I would argue it's the character you make for yourself that's really the crux of it, because that is who you are.
Hmm.
I'm not, a stock boy making money just by, that's not who I am. That's what I
Right.
do.
Right.
And actually that technically isn't me. That's just an example, but
Yeah.
um it's who you are as a person that determines what you want to do to self-actualize.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it determines, it's your environment plays a factor, your means play a factor, uh, who you surround yourself with plays a factor. Like everything in society plays a factor. So
Hmm.
this self-actualization may change. Actually, in all likelihood, it probably will change.
Yeah, because I think I think it has to change for us to evolve.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I hate to say it. There was a time when I saw myself, oh man, if all I want to do is like be an actor or an artist and just create, create, create. And I hate to say it, but that's actually kind of become I don't know, I guess second tier
Yeah.
uh, regarding my, my own personal life.
Yeah.
So I don't see it as important as I used to. Um, for my part now, I personally view self-awareness, global awareness, kind of broadening my scope of the world.
Hmm.
I guess making my world bigger. I guess is kind of uh, my motive now.
Yeah.
But so yeah, back when I was younger, my world was very small. So
Yeah.
uh,
Um, as far as creative though, I don't. I mean, are you saying that you embrace that less now?
realistically speaking, a little bit.
Because I would
I,
I would I would push back against that and say that with the things that we're doing, I think you're embracing it a lot more than you think you are.
I mean, conceivably, but I guess for me, as far as like human development,
Yeah.
I don't consider it as important as I used to, but I still do it. I
Yeah.
mean, I just this past year I've taken up woodworking and leatherworking, and um, I'm going to get back into video editing. Uh, and so there are still creative exercises that I do, especially with our projects.
Yeah.
Um, but me, as far as developmental concerns, um, it's not as important as it was 20 years ago, 15 years
Yeah.
ago, say.
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to kind of round it all out and kind of put it into perspective.
yeah.
Um, well, this was our first attempt at this, and I would say it was pretty successful. We had, James come in and, add some stuff,
So
add,
we had a
some,
view.
yeah, he added some good elements to what we were, discussing, which was good. Um, but I think that this is definitely something that we should continue, like this whole, podcast thing. We should definitely continue it because I think it's good for us, at least from a social health type of perspective. But it also allows us to hopefully interact with more people that are following us, so that we can kind of continue understanding ourselves and understanding the people around us,
Mm,
whether it be literally around us or the ones that you know follow our presence online. So I think that this was definitely a good endeavor to embark on.
mm, agreed.
So um anybody who sees this after as a video on demand, thank you for getting this far. We definitely will be having more of these discussions. I don't know yet how frequently. I believe the next one I plan to have is when Lanky and I go to Comic-Con in Atlanta at the end of August. So that will be a fun podcast to, broadcast, podcast to broadcast. Wow.
Oh, that's how they got the name.
Wow, I'm the short one and it went over your head. But yeah, that's likely the next podcast we will be putting up. So thank you for sticking with us for 2.5 hours. And we hope that you were able to get something out of this. Definitely leave your, remarks in the comments below and let us know if there are any topics that you would like us to talk about. We may not always be, you know, fully aware of certain topics, but we're not above researching things and coming up with, you know, educated opinions toward certain topics. So we hope you enjoyed, and we will see everybody soon. Bye.
Awesome. Cool.